Thank you, everyone, and for the lovely audience that's been staying, especially after lunch and one panel has ended. Thank you once again for being alive. Quickly to the topic that we have. I think the topic speaks about attrition, but we'll take it more positively. We'll talk about retention. We'll deal with why the attrition is there, but we'll deal about what law firm partners at the level they are do differently to retain talent, and talent that is very skilled, talent that has opportunities in abundance, talent that can either work on their own or go to a different law firm and be paid more. But the real question is, and to everyone in that in line, is compensation the only agenda on someone's request that they want to join someone else? Is that the only reason why the attrition is there? And if that is there, how do you mitigate that? What do you do differently if you can't maybe make it the way they're asking or they're getting a different offer? Any thoughts on that?
So, Pranav, compensation is not the and the only matrix to retain talent. I think what is most important is, as I call it, as a professional experience indexation. So when you have a professional experience index, which basically means that the law firm's mind and soul is attuned to the likes and dislikes and interest of the professionals, which basically means, do you have policies which have well-being and work-life balance of the professionals in the heart and center of the soul of the law firm? Because you can have a lot of lawyers joining you because you are a great law firm, you are a big law firm, and you can also but have a lot of attrition, the topic that we are discussing today. So there are a lot of factors that come into play why professionals are retained in a law firm and why there are some law firms which have exit in and entry in and exit out quickly. We'll go into that in detail.
Yeah, thanks.
I tend to agree with her. Compensation is no longer the criteria. The perception is just because you're paying me, it doesn't mean that you can make me work 24/7. Today, the youngsters look at profession differently from what we used to see the profession when we joined. Times have changed, and we have to be alive. It's an elephant sitting in the room. We must consider that what should we do to retain. As you said, retention is more important than looking at the reason for attrition is something which we must consider, whether it's happening in our own firm or across the industry. I personally feel that as a firm, if we stay invested with the associates, with the resources whom we hire, the leadership and the culture of the firm play a huge role in sending out a signal to a person who is joining the firm or who is staying in the firm. When an associate joins, if he knows that he is bound to reach a particular level and all that he has to do is put in his hard work and be sincere, no force on the earth can stop that effort, the sincerity from getting recognized. So once the recognition happens, automatically the interest continues, the partner is invested in the associate is invested in the firm, and then it becomes a happy place to work. Then remuneration is on the side, it's not in the main criteria. That's what I feel.
I guess apart from compensation, what also needs to be viewed is from the talent perspective. Associates joining the firm today have a very different perception of the work, of the culture of the firm, which they have overheard from somebody else who may or may not have a opinion about the firm, and because of that they join and they eventually realize that, okay, this is not the kind of firm or the kind of culture that I want to be part of, and that is why probably then they feel that, okay, my work is not being acknowledged, and that's when they eventually decide to leave. So retention probably may require some introspection both from the firm's perspective as well as by the associates working in the firm.
I just want to pick up from Seema's point earlier. She mentioned work-life balance. Now, I think all of us agree work-life balance today is a lot more important than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. And in a post-pandemic sort of workforce, you know, a lot of people complain that the pandemic sort of blurred the lines between work life and private life. But on the contrary, when I've spoken to a lot of my colleagues who've come back from the pandemic, they felt that work-life balance was achievable in the pandemic because there were they were in an environment where they were able to switch off as well. Now, if we can't, and we all understand the demands of the profession, if we can't give them work-life, if we can't sort of build a framework in the near future, which will be very difficult to do at this point in this profession, to build a work-life balance outside of the workplace, we could look towards building a work-life balance within the workplace. And a lot of the younger colleagues at law firms have friends who work over at technology firms, startups, and so on. And they look at they look at their counterparts in those firms, and they have a social life built into the establishment. And perhaps that's something that we can look to do. It's not easy, it's not overnight, it's not a profession that is geared towards that. There's a certain amount of professionalism that is built into it, but it's something to consider.
I am so sorry. I said, what would be your thoughts on the topic? How do you see compensation as one of the issues, major issues in people moving to different firms, or do you also think that there are many other issues that can lead to people moving away or joining someone else?
Well, compensation is the least of the reasons why you see attrition. I think others spelt out, and whatever I could register, blamed it on the new work environment. I think you need to contextualize this, that the mass attrition is across the professional services industry and not necessarily restricted to law firms. The reasons for legal services in India could be very different. I have seen that the legal profession attracts a lot of lawyers into the metros, unlike, say, an accounting profession or other profession. And you look at typically any law firm, and you would encounter that many of the associates and juniors really come from outside of the 4 metros. Now, obviously, the pandemic crisis forced them to return to their hometowns, and as a result of which, the idea of coming back into their normal workplace and weighing in the advantages of the work-life balance, so on and so forth, made many of them not even return back. So that's one part. Second is, people have also figured out other creative ways and means. I'm told that many of the lawyers have decided that they would look at alternate professions rather than practicing because there are more entrepreneurial avenues to be able to earn a decent living. And the third and the most important reason is also the ability to look at newer laws which don't require you to practice on the original side, whether it's any of the civil laws or criminal laws. People have found cyber laws, advisory services, dealing in laws, crypto in nature, where you don't need to deal with the courts on a day-to-day basis, and you need not be physically present in the city in which you're working, and you can really work remote in some of those areas. So I think it's a host of reasons, and I think compensation is probably the last reason that anyone that the attrition that we have seen would be caused as a result of that.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that by majority puts that compensation is the least factor or the issue that can lead to somebody moving away. And there are areas like work-life balance or leadership or cultural engagement or building of new skill set, learning development, that could be a major factor for people wanting to either start on their own or join someone who is skilled in the kind of work that that person aspires to join. And then we'll probably ask more on, the buzz that we have now is the work-life balance. And, with lawyers spending long working hours, there is so much exhaustion at the end of the day that people believe that maybe practicing law should have come with some kind of footnote to say half or maybe 90% of your life will actually go in practice and 10% will remain in your own hands. How far do you think that is true, Seema?
So, well, law firms are notorious for, I mean, I can see a lot of budding law students here and wanting to enter profession. I'm assuming so, right? We are right here? Okay. So basically, yeah, I mean, law firms are, law as a profession, not only law firms, it's not centric to law firms. Law as a profession is tough. It requires tremendous amount of hard work, but more than that, it requires passion. Now, if you're just looking at a profession as a means of getting into an occupation and earning good amount of money, you're not going to last. I'm being very, very harsh and open here. You're not going to last this profession. It requires tremendous amount of work, tremendous amount of long hours, a lot of understanding. The intensity of work itself. When I meet people and they see, lot of young children intern with us, they feel that their parting note is it is very intense. So the intensity, if you're ready to have intensity, and all of this put together requires a lot of interest in law, a lot of passion in law, and that's not something that you are born with. You tend to enjoy the law over the years as you profess it. Now, long working hours basically means that 10 to 11 hours is a done deal in law firms or in a legal profession, and probably more. But that's not the, as Mr. Butani has also mentioned, this is not what the young professionals are looking at. What we were 20, 25 years back, which it was a done deal that we'll work long hours, there's a work-life balance emphasis by professionals, and that's possible. I'm a living example that I have never worked more than 11 or 10 hours in a day. I have hardly worked on weekends. And I have worked, possibly I was one of the, as a billable hour concept, as a young lawyer, I was very successful in managing those billable hours. I possibly had this time management skill at that early age. In addition to that, long working hours is a done deal, but I think it needs to be managed now.
So long working hours do not really qualify that you're actively working. You would be sitting in office and probably looking at some document to understand what really it is about. But are you doing something about it? That's really, or is it really billable to a client? Which really means that those long hours are qualified for long hours. Otherwise, you can spend.
You're not going to retain and sustain talent if you're not going to do anything about it. This is the go forward right now. You will not be able to consistently slog professionals and then expect that there would not be an attrition and you'll be able to retain talent. So you have to do something about it.
I guess, Pranav, the difference is the expectation that lawyers in general have from the profession. Lawyering is a skill, right? You do not learn it overnight. You have to put in long number of hours to learn that skill and then to perfect that skill. So to add to what Seema mentioned, that yes, working for long hours is a done deal, and yes, you have to be passionate about what you're doing, but at the same time, one needs to also understand that when you are entering this profession, you are trying to learn a skill over the next course of your life, something which will happen over time, and because of which you will have to put in the long number of hours.
Just carrying on from what Sumit said, it's also a matter of perspective. Early on in my career, I remember 12-hour days, 14-hour days, overnighters. But I had a slightly different perspective to it. That wasn't work. If I was in the office for 12, 14 hours a day, I was probably executing for 5 or 6. The other 6 were part of my continuing legal education. Because when you walk in, all of us had illusions of how much we know when we walked out of law school and walked into a law firm. That on day one, we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to, within 6 months, we're going to lead a transaction or we're going to lead a matter. That is not the case. So it's a question of sort of, and sort of making younger colleagues aware of that you're here 12 or 14 hours a day, but 6 of those is personal development. Look at it that way, and it's a matter of perspective, and you will see the value of being in the office for those hours, because it's learning through absorption. You're only going to know it when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, just to take it from what my colleagues have said on the panel, what I personally feel is today's youngsters must have the patience. It's not a 2-minute noodle world. in order to reach a particular level in the profession, you need to have that much of patience. It doesn't come overnight. The profession, as Seema rightly said, you have to put in at least 10 to 12 hours. There's nothing short of it. And if you want to learn quicker, faster, you need to put in those long hours. So passion is more important. The moment you're passionate about the profession, then everything else becomes secondary. You constantly are on the trail of learning. So that doesn't, if you like what you're doing, you will never feel the tiresomeness, you will not feel the fatigue. So according to me, the perspective is more important. When a professional joins the firm, he must think that, okay, I'm here to stay. I have to have the patience to climb up the ladder, and I must be passionate about what I am working, and that will kill the tendency to quit the firm, or, oh, this is too much work, or I'm not being paid enough, I'm being underpaid, the other firms are paying more. All these thoughts will go away if you're passionate about the work, what you're doing.
How, in terms of work-life balance, do you see what the firms do, or what are your thoughts on the generation that we have today that looks at work-life balance in a much more holistic manner than we used to at our times? Do you really think this is the way for going ahead, or is it too much to ask when you're just starting?
Well, I think that, the new generation, and well, when I talk about the new generation, that doesn't mean the generation one is to look at between us and our parents and grandparents. I think every 10 years produces a new generation of, professionals. And those generational gaps have become even wider, as if they were the real generational issues. I think let's look at law graduates in the last, say, 3 years since the pandemic times. I think they have either got used to the work from home culture. They're finding it more difficult to get to the office unless the nature of their work compels them to be in the court every day. I think it's a real challenge. I think the balance has to be struck between working from home convenience versus in the office. I think many of the younger generation, I have seen law graduates in the last 2 to 3 years, their ability to work on soft skills, their ability to observe people and learn, is very different than what I've seen in graduates prior to the pandemic. Also, we shouldn't forget that if supervisors and partners, when they review the work product of the juniors and associates, particularly most of the lawyers that I know, at least from my generation, who would sit and review it and carry out the change and give the manuscript to them, or even if they do an edit on the laptop, the level of understanding and the learning that an associate has is very different. So I think you need to strike a balance between work from home versus a flexible hour. I also feel that our Western counterparts have done well in terms of their ability to manage a work from home culture. There is a greater degree of discipline amongst many of the professionals. So we saw it in pandemic times, particularly for people who do cross-border work. We've had partners from foreign law firms, and whether it's late evening for them or very early morning for them, they are dressed and presentable very well on the screen. Whereas it's a real challenge to be able to get your colleagues to even switch on the screen. Now, it may be cultural, but I think it's a real challenge. And there may be a genuine problem that many of our younger lawyers have. They may not have a dedicated workplace for themselves. They may be sharing a room with one of the partners. But I think that work from home as a culture is yet to evolve, and it will take some time to mature. But I certainly feel that younger associates in the last 2 to 3 years have lost out on the real work experience, and their soft skills have really suffered, in my view.
Thank you, sir. I think in the long term, this will not be a issue that will remain consistent. So people will catch up, especially when they start coming to office. So coming to office is one part wherein you learn not only from the work itself, but there's a culture that you actually become a part of, and that culture, becoming a part of that culture is very important. Until unless you have a gathering of people and you discuss on something, sitting at home will not make you learn all that by a YouTube or a Zoom presentation, for that matter. But coming to the topic of attrition or retention, one of the major or key issues that people leave at a senior level is they doubt the leadership competencies of either the managing partner or the partner leading the department, and they could have their own resentments, they could have their own issues in how to approach everything from how to approach a prospect client to how the work quality is to be delivered, especially at a time when two people could be having similar level of experience. How do you deal with such?
I can tell you out of experience at Argus, what we have done now is to kill this subjectivity. We have brought something called as a modified lockstep. At a partner level, the partner knows that if I am doing this much of work and if I'm able to give so much of team growth, the business growth, the work, he knows for sure that he is bound to go to the next level. So there is a fair amount of transparency, there is a clarity, and there is a roadmap. So this takes away the fear or an apprehension that the managing partner or the executive committee of the firm will have some closed door meetings and they are subjective and they promote one against the other. So to kill all these sort of presumptions, we have now brought in this modified lockstep where every partner knows where he is going to be in a matter of time, maybe 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, 4 years, and there's a clarity and there's a transparency. Therefore, once there is a clarity and there's an assurance, then the fear of having to let go of partners who are good will not come.
Correct. And Sumit, yours is a young firm, so I think the question will not be that much applicable, but whatever your thoughts are.
I think what is more important to note is expectations and dialogue. While what Sudhinder pointed out, a modified lockstep for a firm like Argus is there and is applicable, but for a young firm like us, it's still not there. What we are trying to do is that we are trying to have a dialogue with anybody who is joining the firm, telling them that yes, your work and your contribution is being acknowledged, is being noticed, and there is a certain way and manner that you will grow. The firm grows, you grow with the firm, because since we are a young firm, that's what we can at this point in time say. Other than that, what is also relevant is the expectation. See, many times a junior partner may not be able to convey that what exactly is his expectation that he has from the firm per se, but that dialogue or that discussion is very, very imperative to have. A partner or the managing partner has to take note of that and should encourage that.
So if you are disbelieving your leadership and you have a question that you are actually questioning your partner, you have a problem. A firm which does not inspire, the leadership that does not mentor and inspire your associates and your professional, you are in serious trouble to my mind. Now coming to the question, if the question was that originally, how do you assure your professionals that you will be given due promotion in time, if that was the intent? See, when you're looking at professional, and I'm coming from my own experience of managing a law firm, they're not looking at immediate promotions, they're not looking at immediate enhancement of their roles. What they're looking is empowerment. They're looking at a sense of trust, a sense of encouragement, and sense of being credited for the accomplishments and for the work they're doing. That is promotion for them on a day-to-day basis. This is not a promotion that they want after 1 year. What are they achieving on a day-to-day basis? Are they being credited for it? Are they being empowered to take decisions? Are they being empowered to be accountable for the mistakes that they have done and acknowledge it without the fear of acknowledging that I'll be thrown out of the firm. I think all of that makes a credible firm. All of that makes a credible leadership. All of that makes a credible culture. And these are the factors. I mean, when you have to have a successful firm, you need to have a series of factors contributing there. One is the culture, one is the leadership quality, which is very critical to making people follow you. Other is the satisfaction, the work satisfaction. The fourth is the remuneration you are being paid, the social status of the law firm. There are multiple factors. But one of the biggest factor in retaining talent with your firm is that they should be feeling empowered within their day-to-day functions, and that is how you retain talent.
Thank you so much.
I think you should go to Mr. Butani. I'm the least qualified person on this dais to answer this question. So why don't you throw it to him? I know we're short of time.
Mr. Butani.
My experience, again, with the younger generation is that for them, the work culture is very important. Let me just give in some statistics. And I don't have the source of these statistics, but one of my principal associates pointed out to me that prior to pandemic, the turnover at the associate level was between 15 to 17%. It has almost doubled, if not doubled. And the reason for that are many. One, the ability of the supervisor to communicate effectively the expectations. I have also found that since many of the younger colleagues were not participating physically in the organization, not for their fault, they did not really get engaged with the vision and mission of the organization. Now, this has nothing to do with pandemic. I have seen many professionals who cannot relate themselves to the organization because they merely feel that the vision and mission statements are just written for the sake of being written. And there is very little that the organization does in order to embrace the vision and mission. So I think the vision, driving the vision statement and driving the mission statement and the core values of the firm, in my view, are very, very critical. The third aspect is a gap in the middle. If you consider any professional services, including law firms, in three categories: the people who are the doers, the people who are the supervisors, and then the people who are the managers who manage the firm, the partners. The middle level category of people have been driven in the last decade or so, focusing only on delivery, only on chargeable hours. As a result of which, there is a deficit in their soft skills in terms of their ability to manage, supervise the people very effectively. As a result of which, this middle level of people are struggling to keep the real doers in the organization where the turnover is very high. So I think this is really an amalgam of all the reasons I feel, and it could be worked upon by driving a stronger culture, by focusing on the core values, by smoothing the rough edges of the middle level managers. And I think all of these factors cannot be done by HR. In my view, HR is an outsourced function, whether they look after HR operations or they look after recruitment. The supervisor is, in my view, the real HR person. So I think one needs to work at that level as well to be able to get the softer aspects of the practice right in order to curtail the attrition.
Very, very well said, sir. Very well. You hit to the core wherein we've identified what the issue is. Now, we just need to work on it, and I think it's a much more achievable kind of program that we can build for the mid-senior level, wherein we identify as to what is the expectation of them from the senior level, which the partners actually do, but also from a junior level as to what is expected of them to deliver, to build a career matrix for the junior lot, so that they can understand how do you travel to the highest point in the firm. But I'm gonna come up and close this entire discussion to Zain, who represents GSA, who's inspired many smaller firms, and also a lot of partners who've started independently out of the GSA. How's your experience been in terms of this area?
Look, I mean, I've been at JSA for 13 years, so obviously attrition is not an issue for me. Look, just speaking from my experience, and I'll try and not keep it JSA centric. I think the number one way to retain talent is to understand and manage expectations, because expectations vary across individuals. We started off this conversation with you know, yeah, right, let's just call it money, right? Some people are motivated by money, some people are motivated by recognition, some people are motivated by appreciation. You have to identify what drives an individual, and if you can effectively do that, you can effectively motivate. Now, whether one is better than the other when you're identifying what the drivers are, what the drivers of motivation are, is up to the partnership. But so long as you can do that and you can continue to keep talent engaged, talent will stay. It's not always, it doesn't always work out that way, right? We've seen now in the last 5 or 7 years, the number of offshoot firms that have come out of larger firms is probably more than ever before. And that is, of course, another kind of attrition. They're not joining another law firm. They have that entrepreneurial drive, and I think that's what law firms now need to start looking at. How can they satisfy the entrepreneurial drive of younger partners? If you can identify that, that's just one more, and it's more work for leadership at a law firm, but it has to identify that, because some people don't leave because their expectations aren't being achieved. They just want to build something for themselves, and you have to be able to identify those people and work towards that.
Thank you so much. It's been a fantastic session. Some people also leave to join in-house like me. No resentment towards law firms, but that's also a job that we do and we love it. Thank you so much for all of you. Thank you, Mr. Butani, for being online, and over to you. Thank you.